quite a zoo virtuoso since I became a docent 2.5 years ago. And I'd like to share with you a few of the factoids that I gathered during my research on the history of zoos. I want to start with a quote, and this quote is from one of our Native American elders who lived in the mid-18th century, Chief Seattle. "What is man without the beasts? If all the beasts were gone, man would die of the loneliness of the spirit. For whatever happens to the beasts happens to man. All things are connected." So in this research about the history of zoos, in the year 3500 BC in Egypt, the archaeologists have discovered that they kept animal menageries, collections of exotic animals. They had animals that weren't indigenous to Egypt. They had hippos, rhinos, they had the wildebeest, even elephants, which are living much further south in Egypt. They found paintings on the walls and rocks of some of the structures that had the wildcats that they had, and they also saw depictions of animals on their pottery. And this archaeological dig is in Heliopolis, south of Egypt. Now, closer to Egypt, in the recordings about the year 1500 BC, we find the Queen Hepzibah kept many, is that you or me? Kept many crickets and other. They used these animals for their viewing pleasure, for observation, and for hunting. And you'll also notice on her headdress she has a snake, the asp. So they were very connected to their animals, just like Jocelyn and her puppies.
Oh, okay.
Now let's move ahead another 500 years. China, there was an emperor, Wen Wang. And Wen Wang dedicated 1,500 acres to a garden called the Garden of Intelligence. And of course, the feature animal that they put in the garden and studied was their giant panda. And the reason the Chinese began to study animals in a garden or natural type of environment, ecology. How did things interact? And we find this in the ancient writings. I think Wen Wang was probably our first ecologist. Let's skip ahead now another 2,000 years, come over to Europe, England. Henry I has a huge exotic animal collection. He keeps the animals in an 11-kilometer wooden palisade. He had many wildcats, camels, elephants, wildebeest, African animals that they had brought over to England. And he often took them to London and kept them in the Tower of London so that people could view them. 1520, over in the Americas, the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez meets with Montezuma, the great Aztec ruler, in his sacred city of Tenochtitlan. And the scribes write that Montezuma had extensive animal collections. He kept many of the animals in special buildings. They had an exotic garden, and he had 10 saltwater ponds, 10 freshwater ponds for aquatic animals. It took 300 people, 300 zookeepers, to take care of Montezuma's animals. Next, let's skip way ahead, and in Vienna, Austria, in 1752, the royal family opens the Tiergarten Schönbrunn. Now this animal park is open for the royalty and the wealthy people. But if we move over to Paris in 1793, right after the French Revolution, many of the exotic animals and the menageries that the wealthy people had were gathered up and put into a wonderful park in the southeast area of Paris. Now I was able to visit that park last week. It was the first public zoo opened in Europe. And after this was opened to the public, the one in Vienna, the Tiergarten Schönbrunn, was also open for the public. Coming across the Atlantic Ocean, the first North American modern zoo, just moving over the English Channel to London in 1828, the largest animal collection is contained in the London Zoo, which was opened by the British Museum of Natural History. These scientists had recognized that people wanted to see the animals that they had collected for scientific study. And they had collected them from all over the world because, you know, the sun never set on the British Empire. Now let's move to North America across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1847, the first North American zoo is opened in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Those Canadians had the second largest animal collection, second only to the one in London. Back over to London in 1853, they opened the first public aquarium. They realized that people wanted to see their animals, and our aquatic species are part of the animal kingdom, so they opened what they called the fish house. They kept their species in aquariums, and they put the aquariums in greenhouse-like buildings so they could control the environment, the temperature and the humidity for these animals in the first public aquarium. Now in 1890, let's come on down to the United States of America, and we have our first public zoo opened in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Now this zoo was being put together much earlier than 1890, but the opening was delayed 15 years because of that little event called the Civil War. When it was opened, admission was 10 cents for kids and 25 cents for adults. Back over in Europe, 1907, in Germany, the Hagenbach family was very involved in the exotic animal trade. They helped a lot of the zoos and circuses and private menageries by collecting exotic animals from all over the world. So they decided to open the Hagenbach Tiergarten in Hamburg, Germany. They were the first animal exhibit to use non-bars, non-wire cages, and they separated the people from the animals with moats, water moats. The first year, 1907, that they were in operation, they had 1 million visitors. Moving right ahead into our modern time, in 1963, the first safari park, and that's a park where the people are put into conveyances like a jeep or a bus or a gondola, and you see the animals out in their natural habitats. First safari park was opened in Tokyo, Japan. This is the Tama Safari Park. 1971, let's go up to Seattle, Washington, and the Woodland Park Zoo hires the architectural landscaping firm of Jones & Jones, and they want to make the animals' habitats more like the natural habitats. Here you see this wonderful lowland gorilla. I trekked for gorilla in Rwanda, and it looked much the same. And they were the first to use plexiglass, so it did away with the bars and the cages that the animals used to be in. 1974, Toronto, Canada. The first zoo to figure out geographical regions for our animals. So they put the African animals in one part of their zoo, the Australian animals, and the Asian animals. It's become the zoo standard. If you go to our own Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, we have Africa Encounter, Asian Highlands, and one of our most popular, the Rocky Mountain Zoo. And in 2007, in South Africa, this is about a 4-hour drive from Cape Town, and it's called Gondwandaland Game Reserve Park. Now, if you go to Africa on a safari, you're going to see lots of wonderful exotic animals, but you'd have to go to many different areas and countries to see probably all the animals you want. They've imported animals down to Gondwandaland Safari Reserve Park, and you can unpack your bag once and see the different animals from different parts of Africa. The brief history of zoos. They're wonderful places. I would encourage you, take a look at yourself and your relationship to the natural environment that we live in and the wonderful animals that we have. On your next vacation or staycation, take in an animal attraction. And I'd like to close with another quote that I really like from Mother Teresa. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other.